Humans walk out. Council understands it's too late. Part 1. The great chamber of the Galactic Concordance Council floated in silent orbit around Viridia Prime, a station built from the combined efforts of 200 different species. Its walls shimmered with soft light. Its air filtered through biomechanical lungs that hummed like distant stars. Inside, delegates sat in curved rows, their forms as varied as the worlds they came from. Some scaled, some feathered, some wrapped in shimmering energy fields. All watched the center of the room where a small human figure stood alone. His name was Daniel Hayes, and he was the elected leader of Earth's United Terran Alliance. He wore a simple dark suit, no armor, no ceremonial robes, just fabric and dignity. Around him the air buzzed with quiet judgment. To the Cathari, humans were loud and impulsive. To the Silvathi, they were messy and emotional. To most, they were simply not ready. Hayes had come to ask for something simple, full membership in the Concordance. Not special treatment, not a seat of power. Just a voice. A chance to stand among equals. Councillor Vrel of the Cathari hegemony leaned forward, his three eyes narrowing. Your species has only recently mastered basic orbital mechanics, he said, his voice clicking like stone on stone. You still burn ancient fuels to move your ground vehicles. You argue over borders drawn in sand. How can you possibly contribute to galactic stability? Ambassador Zora of the Silvathi Collective added, her voice like wind through crystal leaves. We admire your spirit, Representative Hayes. But your world is fractured. You have not even unified your own oceans, let alone your people. Return when you have solved your inner chaos. Hayes did not flinch. He had expected this. For years, humanity had been treated like a curious child knocking on the door of a grand library, told to come back when it could read. But Earth had changed. Quietly. Relentlessly. While the galaxy watched for warships and weapons, humans had been building something else entirely. He gave a small nod. Thank you for your time, he said, and stepped down from the podium. Back aboard the UTA diplomatic shuttle Horizon, Hayes sat in silence as it undocked from Viridia Prime. Outside the viewport, the station shrank into a speck of light against the black. He activated a secure channel. Lisa Paul, it's done, he said. On the other end, General Lisa Tran responded immediately. They said no, didn't they? It wasn't even a discussion, Hayes replied. It was a dismissal. Dr. Paul Dawson, head of the Deep Space Initiative, sighed. Then it's time. Yes, Hayes said. It's time. For 6 months, Project Exodus had run in total secrecy. Hidden beneath the ice of Europa, inside hollowed-out asteroids and deep within the shielded valleys of Mars, massive arcs had been assembled. Not warships, not colonies in the old sense. These were vessels unlike anything the galaxy had seen, self-sustaining, self-repairing, powered by a new kind of drive that didn't just bend space, but folded it like paper. The void step drive had been discovered not through advanced mathematics but through human intuition. A team of engineers in Nairobi, working with neuroscientists in Buenos Aires and quantum physicists in Jakarta, had found that human consciousness, when linked in synchronized harmony, could stabilize exotic matter long enough to create temporary wormholes. It wasn't just technology, it was biology, emotion, and willpower woven into physics. The Council would never understand it. They saw logic as clean, cold, and separate from feeling. But humans knew better. Their greatest breakthroughs had always come from hope, grief, love, and stubbornness. Hayes looked at the star map on his screen. Earth glowed softly in the center. Around it, tiny icons marked every human outpost, from the lunar farms to the research stations near Neptune, from the terraforming domes on Proxima b to the deep-range listening posts near the Oort cloud. All of them were ready. Send the signal, he said. Lisa Tran's voice was calm. All units report green. Exodus protocol is go. Across the solar system, lights dimmed in human habitats. Non-essential systems powered down. Families gathered in central chambers. Soldiers stood at ease. Scientists closed their logs. Everyone knew what was coming. No one panicked. They had trained for this. They had believed in this. The decision had not been made in anger. It had been made in clarity. The galaxy had shown its hand. It did not want humanity as equals. It wanted them as subjects or spectators or someday perhaps as relics, but never as partners. and humanity refused to be a footnote. On Mars, a young engineer named Jake wiped grease from his hands and hugged his sister. "You scared?" she asked. "A little," he admitted, "but mostly excited. We're not running away. We're stepping forward." In the Kuiper Belt, Captain Elena Ruiz stood on the bridge of the Ark, New Dawn, watching her crew run final checks. "Remember," she told them, "we're not leaving because we lost. We're leaving because we won. We won the right to choose." Back on Earth, in a quiet room beneath Geneva, President Hayes recorded a final message. It was not for the Council. It was for the future. "To whoever finds this," he began, "know that we tried. We reached out with open hands. We offered friendship, knowledge, and peace. When that was not enough, we chose freedom. Not because we hated the galaxy, but because we loved our people too much to let them be diminished." He paused, then smiled faintly. "We are going somewhere new. Somewhere we can build without permission. Somewhere our children won't have to prove their worth just to speak." He saved the file and sealed it in a data crystal. It would be left behind along with empty cities, silent satellites, and gardens still blooming under artificial suns. The first Ark activated its drive just after midnight, Earth time. There was no explosion, no flash of light. One moment it was there, the next it simply wasn't. Space folded around it like a curtain closing. Then another Ark vanished. And another. Within hours, every human settlement beyond Earth followed. On Viridia Prime, alarms began to chirp. Sensors showed sudden drop-offs in human signals. At first, the Council assumed a communications failure, then a power grid collapse. Then as more and more outposts went dark without explanation, confusion turned to concern. Leah Vex, the only human who had chosen to stay behind as a cultural liaison, watched the reports come in from the observation deck. Her face gave nothing away. When a Cathari aide approached her asking if she knew what was happening, she simply said, "You had your chance." No one understood her words. Not yet, but on Earth, the last of the Arks prepared to jump. Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship Promise, looking at the blue planet below one final time. He thought of all the wars, the art, the music, the mistakes, the triumphs. All of it belonged to them, and none of it needed the galaxy's approval. "Ready when you are, Mr. President," said the pilot, a young woman named Maya. Hayes nodded. "Take us home," the drive hummed to life. Reality bent, and humanity walked out. The Council would not realize what had happened until it was far too late. The silence hit the galaxy like a wave no one could see. One moment, human signals dotted the star charts like fireflies. On Mars, in the asteroid belt near Proxima Centauri, even out by the icy edge of the solar system. The next, they were gone. Not destroyed. Not jammed, just gone. No explosions. No distress calls. No wreckage. Only empty stations, drifting ships with lights still on, and looping messages that said the same thing over and over. "We're leaving. Don't follow." At first, the Galactic Concordance Council thought it was a trick. Maybe a drill. Maybe a protest. Councillor Vrel of the Cathari hegemony scoffed and said humans were always dramatic. Ambassador Zora of the Silvathi Collective suggested they had finally cracked under pressure and abandoned their posts. But as days passed and no humans returned, the mood shifted from amusement to unease. Scouts were sent. Fast, sleek vessels from the Drax, the Ulani, and the Silvathi raced toward the nearest human outposts. They found the same thing everywhere. On Mars, greenhouses still grew tomatoes under artificial suns. In the Jovian shipyards, tools floated mid-air as if dropped seconds before. On Proxima B, a child's drawing was pinned to a wall, stick figures holding hands under two suns. But no people, no bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if every human had stepped through a door that closed behind them and locked from the other side. The Council held emergency sessions. Voices rose in confusion and fear. Some species whispered about a secret weapon, others feared a plague that made humans vanish. A few even suggested divine intervention. But Leah Vex, the lone human still on Viridia Prime, said nothing. She sat quietly in her quarters, watching old Earth films and tending to a small pot of basil she had grown from seeds brought from home. When asked what happened, she only repeated, "You had your chance." Her silence unnerved them more than any warning could. Meanwhile, far beyond known space, the Exodus Arcs drifted in a pocket of folded reality. They weren't in normal space anymore. They existed in a place humans called the Between, a calm, quiet layer of existence where time moved differently and the stars looked like distant memories. Inside the arcs, life continued. Children played in hydroponic gardens. Engineers checked the void step drives. Doctors ran routine scans. Everyone was safe. Everyone was together. On the flagship Promise, President Daniel Hayes met with General Lisa Tran and Dr. Paul Dawson. They reviewed the status of all 1, 2, and 4 arcs. All were stable. All were on course. Their destination was not a single planet, but an entire galaxy, NGC 7746, a spiral galaxy untouched by any known species. It would take them 3 subjective years to arrive, though centuries might pass outside. But that didn't matter. They weren't running from time. They were running toward a future they could shape themselves. Back in the old galaxy, panic began to spread. Human-made goods stopped flowing. Repair parts for fusion reactors, custom neural chips, even certain medicines, suddenly unavailable. Black markets dried up. Entertainment networks lost their most popular dramas, all written and acted by humans. Even the Dracs, who prided themselves on never needing outsiders, missed the clever little drones humans built to clean engine vents in tight spaces. The Council tried to downplay the loss. Humanity was minor, Vrel declared. Their absence will barely be felt. But his words rang hollow. Without humans, the galaxy felt quieter, less colorful, less alive. Then came the first anomaly. A Cathari science vessel, the Whisper of Reason, was scanning the edge of the Sol system when its sensors picked up a strange ripple in spacetime. Not a warp trail, not a gravity well, something smoother, deeper, like a breath in the fabric of reality. Before the crew could report it, the ship vanished. No explosion, no signal. Just gone, the Council sent another ship. It vanished too, fear turned to dread. Scientists from a dozen species gathered data, ran simulations, argued for weeks. Nothing matched known physics. The Ulani, masters of quantum theory, admitted they had no model for what was happening. It's as if space itself is folding, one said, but not in a way that breaks causality. It's gentle. Leah Vex finally agreed to speak, not to the full council but to a small group of researchers. She met them in a quiet garden on Viridia Prime, where earth flowers bloomed under artificial sunlight. They didn't just leave, she said softly. They stepped through. And the door they used, it leaves echoes. What kind of echoes? Asked a young Silvati scientist. Leah pointed to the sky. Watch the rim. That's where you'll see it next. Sure enough, telescopes soon detected faint gravitational pulses near the galactic rim, rhythmic, precise, almost like a heartbeat. Each pulse coincided with the disappearance of another scout ship that got too close. The Council issued a strict quarantine. No vessel was to approach the Sol system or the rim anomalies. But curiosity is hard to kill, especially in a galaxy full of explorers. On one of the Exodus arcs, a boy named Eli asked his mother where they were going. To a place where no one will tell us we're not good enough, she said, holding his hand. Will we ever go back? He asked. She looked out the viewport at the swirling colors of the between. I don't think we'll need to. Inside the arcs, schools taught new subjects, stellar cartography of their destination galaxy, ethics of first contact, with themselves, mostly, and the history of why they left. They didn't speak of the Council with anger. They spoke of it with sadness, like remembering a friend who never saw your true worth. Back on Viridia Prime, the Council grew more divided. Some wanted to hunt for answers. Others wanted to erase humanity from records and pretend they never mattered. But every time they tried to move on, something reminded them. A human song playing on an abandoned station, a recipe for chocolate cake found in a data pad, a simple note left on a lunar base. We love this place. We hope you learn to love others the way they deserve. Leah Vex packed her things one evening. She wasn't leaving. She had chosen to stay, to be the last human in the old galaxy, but she knew her time was ending. She recorded a final message, not for the Council, but for anyone who might one day understand. You thought we needed you, she said, looking into the camera, but we only needed each other. And now we're gone, not because you were cruel, but because you were blind. She sealed the message in a crystal and left it on her desk. Outside, the stars shone as they always had, but somewhere in a place the galaxy couldn't reach, humanity was already building a new sky, and no one there would ever have to ask for permission to belong. Months passed in the old galaxy like slow breaths. The human absence settled into daily life like dust on forgotten shelves. Trade routes once humming with human freighters now moved with mechanical precision, but no soul. Markets missed the bold flavors of earth spices, the rough charm of human-made tools, the unexpected kindness of a human trader sharing a story over a cup of synth coffee. Even the Dracs, who rarely spoke to outsiders, found themselves staring at empty docking bays, where human crews used to laugh and argue in their strange musical language. The council tried to move on. Official statements called the human departure a regrettable but minor disruption. New protocols were written. Old records were archived. Yet in quiet corners of Viridia Prime, beings still whispered about the vanished species. Children asked why humans left. Elders said it was because they were too wild, too emotional, too full of dreams that didn't fit in a galaxy of rules and ranks. But the silence wasn't the only thing left behind. Deep in the outer arms of the galaxy, near the dark veil between stars, the anomalies grew stronger. Telescopes built by the Ulani detected rhythmic pulses, gentle, steady like a heartbeat made of gravity. Each pulse came from a different point along the galactic rim, always moving outward, always leaving no trace but a faint shimmer in space-time. Ships that strayed too close didn't explode or break apart. They simply blinked out as if erased by a thought. The council banned all travel near those zones. Patrols were doubled, yet some still went. A Cathari historian named Trell Vaughn took a small research skiff past the quarantine line, driven by curiosity and grief. He had once studied human poetry and believed their departure was a loss the galaxy would never recover from. His last transmission was calm. "It's beautiful," he said, voice trembling, like watching a door open into light. Then static. No wreckage was ever found. On Viridia Prime, Leah Vex remained the only human presence. She walked the halls like a ghost, speaking only when spoken to. She tended her basil plant, watched old Earth films, and sometimes sat in the observation deck for hours, staring at the stars as if listening for a voice only she could hear. When asked why she stayed, she never gave a full answer. Once she told a young Silvathi aide, someone had to remember them the right way. But even her presence began to fade. She grew quieter, thinner, as if her roots were being pulled toward something far away. The council watched her with a mix of pity and suspicion. They didn't understand that she wasn't just missing her people, she was feeling them. In dreams and quiet moments, she sensed the hum of the arcs, the laughter of children born in the between, the steady rhythm of a civilization rebuilding itself beyond reach. Meanwhile, in the hidden fold of space where the Exodus arcs traveled, life bloomed in ways no one had predicted. The arcs weren't just ships, they were worlds. Hydroponic farms stretched across entire decks, growing wheat, rice, and strawberries under soft artificial suns. Schools taught not just science and math, but music, philosophy, and the art of listening. Children played games that mixed old Earth rules with new ideas born in zero gravity. There were no nations anymore, no borders, no armies pointing guns at each other. There was only one goal: to arrive ready. President Daniel Hayes spent his days walking among the people. He visited classrooms, ate in common mess halls, and listened to engineers explain how the void step drives were holding up. The drives didn't run on fuel or power alone. They needed human minds linked in calm focus. Meditation chambers had become as important as engine rooms. Pilots trained not just to fly, but to feel the shape of space around them. It was a strange kind of science, one the old galaxy would have called magic. General Lisa Tran oversaw security, though there was little to guard against. Their greatest threat wasn't outside, it was forgetting who they were. So she made sure history was taught clearly. Not just the wars and mistakes, but the courage, the kindness, the stubborn hope that had carried them this far. "We didn't leave because we were weak," she told new recruits. "We left because we were strong enough to walk away from disrespect." Dr. Paul Dawson worked with biologists and physicists to prepare for arrival. They studied NGC 7746, their new home galaxy, with growing excitement. It was young, rich in resources, and as far as their long-range scans could tell, completely empty of intelligent life. No signals, no structures, no ruins, just stars, planets, and possibility. On one arc, a girl named Mira asked her teacher, "Will we be alone forever?" The teacher smiled. "Maybe, but being alone isn't the same as being lonely. We have each other. And that's enough." Back in the old galaxy, the anomalies began to change. The pulses grew stronger, clearer. They weren't random anymore. They formed patterns, simple, repeating shapes that looked like spirals, like seeds opening, like hands reaching. The Ulani ran every analysis they could. They found no weapon, no message, no threat, just presence, as if humanity wasn't hiding, but gently reminding the galaxy that they had moved on to something greater. The council held another emergency session. This time, even Councillor Vrel looked uneasy. "They're not coming back," he admitted. "And whatever they've become, it's beyond us," Ambassador Zora added. "We thought we were the teachers, but maybe we were the students who failed the test." Leah Vex listened to the debate from a side chamber. She knew the truth. The pulses weren't warnings or taunts. They were echoes of joy. Every time a child was born in the between, every time a new garden sprouted on an arc, every time someone chose kindness over fear, it sent a ripple through the fabric of reality. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were thriving. And their happiness was so pure, so powerful. It bent the universe around them. One night, Leah stood on the observation deck and whispered into the dark, "I'm proud of you." She didn't know if they could hear her, but she hoped they could feel it. Far beyond the rim, in a place untouched by old rules and old judgments, the Exodus Arcs sailed on. Their destination was close now. New worlds waited. New skies. New names. And for the first time in their history, humans would build a future not for the approval of others, but for the love of themselves and each other. The old galaxy could keep its councils, its ranks, its cold logic. Humanity had chosen warmth, and that choice was already changing everything. Years had passed since humanity vanished, and the galaxy had learned to live with the quiet. But the quiet was changing. The gravitational pulses near the rim were no longer faint whispers. They were clear, steady, and impossible to ignore. They came in waves, each one stronger than the last, like a drumbeat echoing from another world. Scientists from every major species gathered on Viridia Prime, their faces tight with worry and wonder. None of their models could explain it. None of their machines could replicate it. It was as if space itself was breathing, and the breath came from somewhere they could not reach. Then one morning, a signal arrived. It wasn't a transmission through comms or subspace. It appeared directly in the Council's central data core, a single crystal warm to the touch, glowing with soft blue light. No ship had delivered it. No drone had carried it. It had simply appeared on the main console during a routine scan, as if placed there by an unseen hand. The Council gathered in emergency session. All eyes turned to Leah Vex, the last human. She stood at the edge of the chamber, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When asked if she knew what it was, she only said, "It's time you listened." With cautious hands, the Ulani techs inserted the crystal into the reader. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. It showed Daniel Hayes, older now, his hair more gray, his eyes calm but firm. He stood not on a ship or a planet, but in a place filled with green plants, soft light, and the sound of distant laughter. "We didn't leave because you rejected us," Hayes began, his voice clear and steady. "We left because you never saw us. You called us primitive while we solved problems you didn't even know existed. You watched our wars and ignored our peace. You studied our weapons and missed our art. We offered partnership. You offered pity, so we chose freedom." The chamber fell utterly silent. Even the air recyclers seemed to pause. Hayes continued, "This is not a threat. It's a gift. Along with this message, you'll find schematics for the Void Step Drive, the technology that let us leave. We're sharing it so you can understand what we became, not to follow us, not to chase us, but to grow." The hologram shifted. Complex diagrams unfolded, circuits, energy fields, neural resonance patterns. But as the scientists leaned in, their excitement turned to confusion. The drive required something they did not have. Not just exotic matter or rare crystals, but a living component. Synchronized human brainwaves, shaped by empathy, memory, and shared hope. It was biology woven into physics, and without humans, it was useless. Councillor Vrel stood abruptly. "This is a trick," he said, voice sharp. "You give us plans we cannot use. You mock us from beyond the stars." Leah Vex finally stepped forward. "It's not mockery," she said quietly. "It's a mirror. You wanted proof we were advanced, here it is. But the real lesson isn't in the machine. It's in why only we could build it." She turned to the Council. You thought intelligence was cold logic. We knew it was also love, grief, courage, and the will to protect others even when it costs you everything. That's what powers the drive, not equations, heart. Ambassador Zora of the Silvathi bowed her head. We failed to see you, she admitted. Not because you were hidden, but because we refused to look past our own pride. The truth settled over the chamber like rain after a long drought. Humanity hadn't just escaped. They had evolved, not in body but in spirit. They had turned their greatest weakness, emotion, into their greatest strength. And in doing so, they had unlocked a door the rest of the galaxy didn't even know existed. Leah walked to the center of the room and placed a second, smaller crystal on the console. This one is for you, she said. It contains everything, our music, our stories, our science, our mistakes, our dreams. Keep it, learn from it, or forget it. It's your choice now, just as it was ours. She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the silence. In the days that followed, the council did something it had never done before. It paused. No debates, no votes, just quiet reflection. Species that had argued for centuries sat together in shared grief. The Dracs played a human symphony in their war halls. The Ulani projected Earth sunsets in their labs. Even Varel was seen standing alone in the memorial garden, staring at a single rose blooming under artificial light. The gravitational pulses continued, but now they were understood. They weren't accidents. They were echoes of a new reality, ripples from a civilization that had chosen unity over division, compassion over control, and freedom over approval. Each pulse was a heartbeat from a galaxy far away, where humans were no longer asking to belong. They simply were, and the old galaxy could do nothing but watch. Leah Vex prepared to leave Viridia Prime. Not to follow the Exodus, she knew she could not, but to return to Earth, now empty and quiet, to walk its silent streets one last time. She packed a small bag, her basil plant, a data pad with her favorite poems, and the last photo of her family, taken under a real sun. As her shuttle lifted off, she looked back at the station shrinking behind her. She felt no anger, only peace. They had tried. They had offered their best. And when it wasn't enough, they walked away with grace. Far beyond the rim, in a young galaxy filled with promise, the Exodus arcs neared their destination. Children pointed at new stars. Farmers tested soil from untouched worlds. Engineers ran final checks on landing systems. There would be challenges ahead. Storms, wild terrain, unknown dangers. But they would face them together as one people, with no one to tell them they weren't ready. The council would never reach them. Not because the distance was too great, but because the path required something they had never learned to carry. The courage to believe in something greater than themselves. And that, more than any driver ship, was what made humanity truly free. Time moved differently in the new galaxy. Not faster or slower, but with a kind of softness, as if the stars themselves were breathing easier. The Exodus arcs had arrived. Not all at once, but in waves unfolding from the between like seeds opening in warm soil. Each arc settled near a world that called to it. Some green and wet, some dry and rocky, some wrapped in rings of ice. There were no flags, no claims, no borders drawn in haste. Only careful steps, shared plans, and the quiet understanding that this was not a conquest. It was a homecoming. On the surface of the first world, named Verity by a child who said it felt true, President Daniel Hayes stood barefoot in the grass. It was real grass, grown from earth seeds, watered by rain that fell from clouds shaped by human hands and hope. Around him, people built not just shelters, but communities. Laughter rang through the trees. Music played from open windows. Children ran with animals that had never known cages. There were no soldiers on patrol, no scanners watching for enemies. The only watchful eyes belonged to parents, teachers, and neighbors who cared. General Lisa Tran walked beside Hayes, her uniform replaced by simple clothes, her voice softer now. "We did it," she said, not with pride, but with wonder. "We're just beginning," Hayes replied. "But yes, we're safe." Far above, in orbit, Dr. Paul Dawson oversaw the final shutdown of the void step drives. They would not be used again, not for travel, not for war, not for escape. They had served their purpose. Now their parts would be melted down and turned into plowshares, school bells, and wind chimes. The knowledge would be kept not as a weapon, but as a lesson, that the greatest power comes not from force, but from unity. Back on Viridia Prime, the old galaxy still turned. But it turned quieter now. The council no longer debated humanity's place among them. That question had been answered long ago, not with words, but with absence. In its place, a new question grew. What did it mean to be truly advanced? Some species tried to copy human ways. The Silvathi began teaching emotion alongside logic in their schools. The Ulani built gardens in their labs, saying that beauty helped thought grow. Even the Dracs softened their rigid codes, allowing moments of silence for reflection. None of it was perfect. Old habits die hard, but the seed had been planted. Leah Vex never returned to Viridia Prime. She stayed on Earth in a small house by the sea where the waves still remembered human voices. She grew vegetables, wrote letters no one would read, and sometimes sat on the porch at night watching the stars. She knew she would never see her people again. But she didn't feel alone. In her dreams she heard their songs. In the wind she felt their joy, and in her heart she carried their truth. Years passed. On Verity, cities rose, not tall and cold but low and warm, built to hold people, not impress them. Farms spread across valleys. Schools filled with students who learned not just how to build, but why. They studied the old galaxy not with bitterness, but with caution. They weren't evil, a teacher told her class. They just forgot that kindness is a kind of strength. New generations were born who had never seen Earth, never known rejection, never heard the word inferior. To them, humanity was not a species that once begged for a seat at a table. It was a people who built their own table, set their own rules, and invited everyone to sit as equals. One day, a young girl named Nia climbed a hill on Verity and looked up at the sky. She asked her grandfather, "Do you think they miss us?" He smiled. "They don't need to miss us, little one. We're still part of them, and they're part of us. Distance doesn't break that." She nodded, satisfied. Then she ran down the hill to join her friends planting trees. Back in the old galaxy, the gravitational pulses had faded, not because humanity had stopped thriving, but because the echoes had done their work. The lesson had been heard. The mirror had been held up. And though the council would never admit it aloud, they knew the truth. They had lost something precious, not because it was taken, but because they failed to see its worth. Councillor Vrel retired to a quiet moon, where he spent his days reading human poetry. Ambassador Zora commissioned a great library filled with every human story, song, and scientific paper they had left behind. It became a place of pilgrimage for young beings from every species, all asking the same question: how did they do it? The answer was always the same. They chose each other. On Viridia Prime, a memorial garden bloomed with earth flowers, roses, daisies, sunflowers, all grown from seeds saved by Leah Vex before she left. Visitors came not to mourn, but to remember. A plaque at the entrance read, "Here stood a species that walked away not in anger but in dignity. They taught us that the highest form of power is the freedom to leave. And in a galaxy far beyond, under new suns and unfamiliar stars, humanity lived, not as legends, not as myths, just as people, tending gardens, raising children, building futures, and walking forward without looking back." The council finally understood. It was too late to apologize, too late to follow, too late to matter, but humanity didn't need them to matter anymore. They had already found everything they were looking for, in each other.